Hello, everybody. We're back with a top five for common magic items in the old world. So I thought we'd look at magic items that are accessible to all armies because in the end, or the wash up, I think there were more than I thought were relevant. However, I guess that comes down to the reality that there are some very common in what people call loadouts for characters around, I guess, every army, because the generic magic items, I'm not sure whether they're so good, but they are definitely good enough that you can build particular types of characters that are flexible enough and powerful enough to be good in all armies. So I want to take a look today at the top five magic items, in my view, for common magic items that any army could take. That doesn't include any of the more specific ones for specific factions or armies of infamy, of which there are plenty, that's for sure. So, without further ado, we'll move on and have a look at what my number five is. Before then, I just want to thank Jeff again from Pandemwargaming, the major sponsor of this channel. I've just wrapped up another 40 graveyard bases for a Vampire Counts army that I'm playing on Saturday week, and I think Jeff was able to express post them to me, which was great. I've got them on Friday. I've undercoated them and have painted them up already. So that's the sort of service Pan and Wargaming provides. Any bases, these were all from the Charlie Factory line. The graveyard bases, I've used volcanic bases before. They're excellent prints that Pan and Wargaming has the license for. You can also get high quality plastic terrain and other accessories for the old world. Check it out below. Make sure to follow the links so the channel gets a kickback. Beyond that, also our financial supporters, we couldn't do this without you anymore. I'm hoping the audio quality is a little bit better. We'll see. Always happy to take your feedback, but everybody who chips in helps us to make the videos a little bit better and keeps Paddy and I churning them out. I think he is at home making a few more today as we speak. So, number five for me is Ogre Blade. Some people might have had this all the way at number one. I think with it moving to 75 points, that might no longer be the case. However, I think I sort of ummed and ahed about having it in my list altogether. I don't know if it is as ubiquitous as it once was, but what it does, no, I think what it does is the only thing that really does what it can for any army. So people often try Giant Blade and then realize without the armor piercing characteristics, it's next to useless, even though it's very cheap comparatively. So what Ogre Blade does at 75 points, it can make any Lord level character a beast. So that includes things like, you can have your typical Bretonian Duke running around with it and Syrian's Locket, and with the attacks there, and Knightly Virtue of Knightly Tempo is an absolute machine. But you can also just whack it on things like a Death Hag or a Strigoi Ghoul King and take what a character with excellent baseline stats, such as Hatred, and turn it into what is known as a blender. So beyond that, you can just put it on your general who can take up to 100 points of magic items, and suddenly you're hitting probably at least strength 6, AP2, AB1, D3 wounds. It means you're sort of in the fight against anything. I think on top of that, there's a lot of combo potential. So with those aspects like virtue of knightly temper, with anything that gives hatred, as I just said, but also stuff like the Chaos Lord who used to run around or still does with the enchanting aura, where you are able to strike first. So you've got that chance of killing them before they are able to strike back with the D3 wounds. When you're able to put it on a character who's got 360 line of sight, you can get into a flank of something like monstrous cavalry, like dragon ogres or demigryphs. And if you kill the first one, you've killed all of them in base to base contact, and they're not going to be able to fight back. There's lots of potential with the Ogre Blade to turn what might just be a ho hum or even slightly above average character into the best killing machine on the battlefield. So the fact that that's available to all armies is a really big deal. Does it make units characters glass cannons? I suppose a little bit. 75 points. What you can no longer take Talisman of Protection, which was sort of the combo in the past, where with mundane equipment, Talisman of Protection, you could have a 5-up ward and some sort of armor save on top of that. So I think that, yeah, is it, but in there, maybe if you're playing 200 to 300 points, it might be worth it. To have that glass cannon type character, whether or not it's still the best option for things that run around at 500 points, which is the cap most people are playing at. I'm not sure, and that's where I think it started to slide a little bit in popularity. If you have something, I suppose Armor of Meteoric Iron could also be in there, but if you've got an in-house 25 points or less item that allows you to get double saves and the Ogre Blade, maybe it's still one of the best things you can buy. Number 4 for me is Charm Shield. So you may not know, but in the World Team Championships at the moment, Charm Shield is the most common magic item. For 5 points, you get +1 armor save for being a shield. You get a 5+ ward, 1 off. And I would be lying if that 5-up ward has not won games almost, probably, almost against me. I don't know if I've actually used it and won a game with it, but there's certainly been moments where the 5-up ward, which I think is what Warhammer's all about, has won the game when you can roll that unlikely series of events and skew things in your favor. So it's something that people use a lot with their leftover points. Like, because it's extremely common, you can have 4 or 5 in your list, and yeah, that I think people have. I know Andrew at Old World Fanatics has run at least, was it 3 or 4 against me when we were playing in the last Old Hammer. So if you're paying 2 points for a shield anyway, if with a character, you're just adding +3 points on top of that to get the Charm Shield in there. On top of that, it's an excellent magic item for champions. So with the next magic item we'll talk about, there's a pretty generic loadout you can give champions who can take up to 25 points, and even banners up to 25 points. So if you're taking a Charm Shield on your champion, typically in a challenge you're getting against another champion, you're sort of getting this one-off chance to survive, and that's where it's hurt me in the past. I'm not sure if it's always been on top of characters, it's done a lot, but you'll find that if you reason out the equipment that you're giving a character, that it's pretty easy just to throw it in at the end for a 1 or 5-up ward if you don't already have that sort of characteristic. So I've had it on elves with Blood of Calidor. I think it's been there. It's on my White Lord at the moment, BSB, who can take that. So you're getting all of the attributes of a shield. For +3 points, you're getting this 1 or 5-up ward, which, probabilistically does not come off more often than or come off as often as you might want it to, but it's pretty much free when you think about it. Number 3 for me is War Banner. I think War Banner is starting to become a little bit underrated. For 25 points, a lot of banners, particularly for core units, hover around that 25-point range. I don't really know if a lot of the 50-point banners are any good. Actually, most of the generic banners aren't very good. You see Rampaging Banner get used in some niche situations. You see Razor Banner used in some niche situations. I think the Stubborn ability for 50 points is probably something to think about with some lists, but if you're paying 50, that's quite a lot when a lot of units, especially elite units, already have that built in. War Banner for 25 is really good. So if you can just, everything with infantry is about res at the moment. 25 points is the sweet spot to add +1. But one of the great ways to understand Warhammer maths is that +1 is not the fraction of what you're getting. So if you're getting +4 and then +1 extra, it's often exponential. That what you're doing when you're stacking these buffs is that you're adding that, not just the extra. It's sort of like implied odds in poker, but if you can add enough to win by 1, that's already going to create a break test. But if you're adding that sweet spot to just make sure you win every time, you're also getting the benefit of not losing, which means like, you don't have to roll on the odds. There's all these other benefits. So everything is, we might need to do something about Warhammer maths. Probably another way to understand that is when you're going from a 3+ save to a 2+ save, the +1 that you're getting there is so much better than the 6+ to the 5+, for example. So the greater you're going, the better it is because you're going to win combat res by more. The leadership test is less. You're not taking a leadership test, let alone factoring all the equations where does a musician matter and all this extra junk. But just being able to add +1 for 25 to what sometimes is the difference between two infantry uh, units is a really big deal. So understanding that, having that option, there aren't a lot of ways to get that. It's what makes me think Horde is quite valuable a lot of the time as well, that it's harder to come by combat resolution than you might think. So on top of that, the fact that you can use this in core units and the BSB, so when you can core units, you don't have a lot of options for banners. In on top of that, the BSB, I think there are a lot of armies. It's a shame because we're sort of moved into this double, even triple dragon metagame, Peg Knights, Undead armies, where a lot of flavor is in these battle standard bearers who carry around a highly mobile, like on a Griffin, on a Stag, the Slan, BSB, and something like that, where you run around with the battle standard and the war banner, and you're probably mobile enough to get into someone's flank, and you're coming in with +3 naturally. Those sorts of characters are famous for whiffing, especially their mounts, if they're things like Great Eagles or the like, Griffins. But +3 is a huge amount, and if they're sort of armored enough not to take a lot of damage in reply, they can usually break something, especially if they cause terror. So I think just the general nature of Warbanner has me still having it at number 3. And if you look with Charm Shield, Obsidian Lonestone, and Warbanner, for 50 points, you're getting a pretty decent little package. They can add to a lot of different core units for 50 points to make them a bit more resilient and robust if you're struggling to find something to sort of trick out or even just use points in your core. Number 2 for me is Lore Familiar. So Magic has taken a little bit of hit in this 1.5 update. I would say it's a little bit. I don't think the rumors of Magic's demise are really holding water at the moment. I think that you're still, in a lot of ways, before it wasn't getting spells off all the time. Sure, there were these double level 4 armies that were getting spells off all the time, and they were hard to stop. Death Stars with 2 level 4s in them, and it was gross. But it's more about the type getting the key spell off, and you still have access to things like Power Scroll. You can still be outside of the dispel bubble, and even things like vortexes have gotten better or more resilient in this format. So I think Lore Familiar, being able to control anything in Magic is a big deal. So the signature spells matter a lot in a lore because you can get a series of level 1s and play them as with the whatever sig or native lore that you have. But the lore familiar does the same thing, and you can do things like get Steed of Shadows and run a demonology caster in a block, an infantry block. You can have Spectral Doppelganger. You can take other key spells like I'm running at the moment in my vampire counts to make sure I get the leadership debuffs from Necromancy. I'm not really a huge fan of Necromancy otherwise. It also just makes level 2s relevant. So pay the extra 30 points for an extra spell, or 60 points, I suppose, to actually have 2 useful spells instead of just reverting to a signature. I think it's a pretty big deal in this game that so many of the spells are useless, and it's sort of 50-50. You know, try rolling on the Lore of Athel-Loren or the Lore of the Wilds, whatever it's called, trying to get Fury of Athel-Loren. Really, you want Lore Familiar to be able to get it because the rolling, even with a level 4, to get a third of the time not to get it is a really big deal. It means you can run combos, so you can have that uh let's say a battle magic caster inside Ogre Death Star or the Minotaur Bloodherd Death Star, and you can take Oaken Shield and Arcane Urgency. Some people like Hammerhand. It means you can make sure you get with that special Doppelganger caster. Glittering Robe has been used for vampires to cast that into combat. And as I was saying, having the leadership debuffs, for example, like getting both -2 and -1 on a character so that you can use Wailing Dirge properly. Lore Familiar, just giving that control is a good thing in the game, and I wish there were more ways to be able to control what sort of spells you could get, or just making all the spells actually decent. Hello, Dark Magic. Um, the arcane slot, though, is often very competitive in certain armies. For example, Wood Elves and Oaken Stave. So that's a critical item for them to stop themselves being fireballed to death. And in other armies, you're looking at, like, for example, in the Vampire Count's army, you want Scepter de Noiro as the number one pick, and then the Skull Staff is also very good. So another dispelling item. So sometimes the Lore Familiar like crosses with Hag Tree Fetish with for Beastmen, and you can't play both. That's really the only downside. So I still think it's really good, and I'd be very happy to have it number one. But for me, the number one pick has to be Talisman of Protection still. Um, I think the next video I want to make is on the 5 most broken things in the metagame. And when I was thrashing this out with Patty, we talked about triple saves, and I said, "Don't worry, I'm going to cover it when I talk about Talisman of Protection in the magic item video." So layered saves are just one of the broken things in the metagame, and nearly Talisman of Protection means nearly everybody gets access to it. So if you have a way to have regeneration, of course, but some armies have that inbuilt, or they have the ward inbuilt and can get the regeneration elsewhere. So Chaos can do it that way. Vampires can get it with the native regeneration, and so can Tomb Kings. High Elves can take this and the Seed of Rebirth. But double saves are bad enough. Like when you see infantry with an armor save and a ward save, it's pretty bad. 5 up, 5 up, remember, is a more than 50% chance of saving that wound. I think it's 55%. So when you can do three, sometimes 5 up, 5 up, 5 up, for example, you're getting 70% of wounds saved. It's pretty crazy. And I think it's one of the reasons that the game is not as combative as people expect it to be, the triple saves. When you combine that with monstrous mounts, it's absurd, and it's one of the things I try to put into all of my armies. I think when you look at all the saves too, the unmodified ward save, or I guess there are no modifiable ward saves, is the best that's out there. So armor saves can always be reduced, although there's not a lot to reduce them to zero. There are things like that, and there are other things that turn off regeneration. When I think there's not many things that turn off ward saves at all. Warpfire Dragon comes to mind. Um, I think the Blade of Revered Zutsuchi for the Lizardmen comes to mind. That's about it. Otherwise, you're looking at common things like Vile Tide, still allowing a ward save, Wailing Dirge, still allowing a ward save. So on top of that, 30 points is quite cheap, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. So, you can put I find, like, if I run Lizardman, I've got the Talisman of Protection and Armor of Meteoric Iron on my Carnosaur. So for 5 up, 5 up for 50 points on a hero, that's a really good package. Underneath that, before you could take it with Ogre Blade, but you can still put it on a wizard who's on a chariot, or like such as a Mortis Engine, or on something larger, and have access to, Talisman of Protection, Power Scroll, Lore Familiar, you've got 20 points left over. It's incredible. I think Talisman of Protection is still number one, even though I think Lore Familiar is very powerful. I think just in general use, you're going to find nearly every army is going to find a reason to take it. These are my honorable mentions. So even though I love Ruby Ring, doesn't make my top 5 anymore. I think nearly every army should take it. But if you have ranged attacks, I do think Ogre Blade is still more influential in the metagame. Power Scroll that I talked about just a second ago, I think they're creeping back in a lot more at that idea that you just need the key spell to go off. I'll be trying to cast Hellish Vigor on turn 1 with Power Scroll a lot of the time next weekend. Obsidian Loanstone, as I said, especially because you can take multiples, with magic resistance getting more important. Especially great because you can take it on a unit champion a lot of the time and give them -1, but doesn't beat out. I don't use it often enough to say that should be in my top 5. I think Biting Blade is something. Paddy was a big fan of it before I used it in for 15 points. Like, Burning Blade's a waste of time for 5 points. If you're looking for magic weapons, Biting Blade for just 15, that -2 AP tells you a lot about how the format works. But there are a lot of characters who just getting that, taking the edge off a big save, makes them very effective in combat for not a lot of points. The armor of meteoric iron, I really like. It fits a very niche role well. A lot of characters want to be heavily armored, but they might not. Something like a demon prince from Chaos or like the Carnosaur might not have access to a 3+ save. So getting a 5 up unmodifiable instead is generally worth it for not many more points. If you remember, like some character has full plate and a shield that generally is up to 8 already. So the armor of meteoric iron is 12 points more for an unmodified save. And my honorable mention goes to Bedazzling Helm. I know that it was better in the early days of the format, but I am starting to see it come back. Bretonian Dukes with Monster Slayer or Doom Balls for Beastmen, still a big hit to stack with Slugskin. So I think it's pretty good, Bedazzling Helm, and defense tends to be better than offense in Warhammer the Old World at the moment. We'll see if you agree. If you disagree with me strongly, I welcome it. Bring it to the comments. Let me know what you think. It's been a year and a half of the Old World. 1.5 is kicking in now. Do you think the top 5 that I've outlined is right, or do you have a different opinion? Thanks again. See you next time.